Alright, so a different angle with here. I'm trying to do my best to not get as much of the light in the shot because I know that was the problem last time. But yeah. So, welcome. This is RC Apologist. Want to cover, well, more so reflect on something that's happened over the years. Things that I believe helped me get to where I am today in terms of discussions and dialogues, and then eventually, of course, where we're at now. Well, obviously, person mentioned here, G-Man. Um, I believe by the time I started really getting involved within the community of, this whole apologetics community, the main place I started getting into that was with regards to G-Man and the little deals that he did. He had like the G-Man versus the World series that would be done, and I would occasionally show my face there. I believe there was actually one of the old videos of that where it shows my first appearance on there. You see a younger version of me with like it's kind of scraggly, jacked up hair, thinner chin, thinner cheeks, not as big boned as Lambda, and of course, hair instead of just like this little buzz cut here. I actually had hair back then. Um, this was definitely at a time where I was definitely new to a lot of stuff within apologetics. I was not a Calvinist. I was not Reformed at the time. I was just your average non-denominational type, um, and I just did what I could in trying to study and observe scripture and how to defend the faith when I had questions myself, and I was trying to inquire about those questions. So, that being said, um, with what happened, me and G-Man definitely, there were times we seemed to be alright, but we definitely did not get along because of the main dispute that came out at the time was being a Christian and then being a theistic evolutionist is what I was, and still am today. But I was a whole lot more dogmatic about it. Whereas today I'm really not. And for some reason I usually get accused of being, um, I don't know, like usually I'm finding it weird when like some of these more liberal Christians or even the non-Christians, like I remember, what was his name? White Engine, aka HistoryNet, aka loads of other different names. Now it's Purple Pill Philosophy because he had his whole falling out with Max and the Red Pill community. Um, but yeah, like now I'm usually the one being accused of being like because I'm kind of betrayed to the faith or something like that now. So I can't please anybody at all these days. So when everyone says like you try to compromise, I'm doing a pretty terrible job at that. So with what happened, me and G-Man eventually had our falling out where it was, oh, you believe evolution? I'm going to start fighting about this. And it got way too escalated than it needed to be on both ends. That's where I'm even saying I'm willing to take some of the blame and some of the fault for that. Um, and during these issues, I eventually start to realize during an early period, thank goodness, that it was just not a debate worth having for the most part. Like, we would occasionally bring it back up, and I, of course, had a different perspective where I wasn't nearly trying to argue from the basis of just scripture itself at that point. Now, did I say you could probably find some ways to argue it for a specific case? Probably, but nowadays I go with a position more so of a theological messaging kind of perspective. The basically, as Calvin had described it in his Institutes, as God trying to speak Babel, so that way to speak it within our terms, so that way we can understand at least the theological significance of things such as creation. Um, so we've had that discussion, and that eventually got way too hashed out, and me and G-Men realized we were not going to really, settle our come to an agreement on that. So we tried to do a point where we would be, reunited in a bit. And we did for a little bit. There is even the video that's out there where it shows us being that first little reunion kind of notion where we're trying to be like, I believe it was called the G-Man I Want to See More of. And it shows us like just being in that unity where we're not disagreeing, we're not fighting, we're doing our best to defend the faith against, the atheists and all these other deals that are happening. Then the next incident was just slightly into that, but I don't think it really kept going to there. Mostly at this point, it got into the issue of Calvinism, because at the time I became a Calvinist, and I was just your cage stage guy at the time. So I was just essentially saying, Calvinist this, Calvinist that, be Calvinist, I challenge you to the... I was cringe back then when that happened. And a lot of people usually are, because whenever you kind of discover this stuff, it's mostly for if you become in part of almost any kind of aspect, you just want to talk about it. You don't want to shut up about it. You want to just keep bringing it up. And if someone disagrees with you want to debate them about it. I understand the need for that, but I'm not gonna lie. It was very cringy, and I see that I cringe at the same time when I see a lot of people doing that today. So, we had that whole deal, and of course there was the misrepresentation from him at times, and it's mostly because what he knew about Calvinism, or at least some of the doctrines of Calvinism, was because he adhered to some of the doctrines of the Black Hebrew Israelites. And me and a mutual friend of ours, Veckel, both of us corrected him on that because of the fact that you can't just base your knowledge on Calvinism specifically and exclusively on a cult known as the Black Hebrew Israelites, because their notion of limited atonement is very different than the notion of the Gentile and Jew view of limited atonement, where it's not just simply the Jews or the Israelites as the Hebrew Israelites teach, but that it is the Jews and the Gentiles upon this election, and it is through the atonement in which the church is redeemed. So we had that kind of falling out a bit throughout those issues, and it wasn't as big. I believe the biggest thing that came about through the controversies that have evolved over time, and I believe this was the one that broke the camel's back, was that it was me coming out with a video on 2 Corinthians 4:4. Now, I knew from the get-go that whenever I usually posted like a title to a video or did some kind of video at that time, I was going to get into some controversy. It was nothing new. It was something I was used to. And during this time, it was about, defending the notion that the God of this world mentioned in 2 Corinthians 4:4 was indeed Yahweh and not the devil. And eventually, later on, me and G-Man would revisit this issue and actually have a full-on debate. And I believe we had S.J. Thomason hold it on her channel. So if y'all want to see that, I believe it's either in the debate playlist that's on my channel, or you can check it out on S.J. Thomason's channel. But yeah, we had that whole deal. But when it started out, it was G-Man definitely responding with a lot of, basically that was the one time he would it wasn't necessarily the theistic evolution stuff that would get me labeled as the heretic. It wasn't the Calvinist stuff that would get me labeled as a heretic. It was this particular issue, was who is the God of this world, and subscribed in 2 Corinthians 4:4. I laid out the biblical case, the biblical arguments, what G-Man normally would do with what he subscribed and mentioned. Also, what's up, Cirrus? I see you in that chat, boy. Little VTuber, son of a gun, looking more adorable than I do, man. What's up with that? And what's your secret? What's your secret, son? Anyways, enough of that. Here to bug the crap. Well, okay, that's your secret then. It's just you bugging crap out. All right, you're free to stay there, rent free in the live chat. Just make sure you clean up after yourself. You know what I'm saying, son? And by the way, just in case anyone's wondering what this is, because it says it's the Sani bottle on there, it's just a little bit of the that Mio stuff there. I get some vitamin B in there, so get some of that. But yeah, I think the main thing where I was accused of being a heretic by G-Man at the time was over this issue, and it got heated to the point where I said here's the biblical verses and the parallel to Isaiah, and G-Man would just say it says to harden the hearts, and only Satan hardens the hearts. So it was a very interesting debate and discussion that we have, and as even Veckel pointed out, the other part was just over the name. That was again a minor thing though, because people always try to comment on the name that I had back then. He's the Christian anarchist. He's actually an anarchist. It's against the government and all that. I mean, I used to be an anarchist to some degree, but I just really honestly don't care at this point regarding where I stand on any form of politics. I try to stay out of politics in general. So to some degree, that name could be true. But regarding the matter, yeah, we had that issue, and it eventually got to the point where we were like now having conversations. It got to the point that at the time, what was called the Council of Google Plus, they still exist around as a blog today regarding the Council of Google Plus. They had a little deal where they were discussing over because there were people that disagreed with the notion. Including Matt Slick, who disagreed with my particular interpretation and understanding of it. But Slick was able to point out where he could see a defense of the point. Because that's the thing. Matt Slick and G-Man agreed on the notion, but Slick was at least willing to admit and point out where the strong suits are and where is biblical justifications to see a point with what I was trying to propose. Even though Slick could still disagree. G-Man, on the other hand, went to a different direction with it and just tried to ultimately accuse Matt of affirming the view, even though there was a difference in that. By the way, ignore that. But yeah, so regarding the matter, there was then ultimately getting into that and pointing out how does all these work, and it get into a whole bunch of issues. It was essentially, the only thing I could come up with a similar analogy of it is discussions between the Cornelius Van Til and the Gordon Clark controversies that happened. It essentially being described as things that honestly were not too important to have in terms of like salvational issues and that sort of stuff, but at the same time it was a dialogue that needed to happen to go over certain topics that weren't that discussed. And that's normally what I tried to do with my channel. I tried to discuss things I thought no one on Christian YouTube was discussing at that point. Not really much people talked about or thought about, 2 Corinthians 4:4, what does that really go to? Or, can there be people that be saved after taking the mark of the beast, So, that was also one of the other controversies, was that one where I was basically accused of being a heretic for the second time because I disagreed with most people saying you are completely damned if you take the mark of the beast. Even though I point out, again, biblical justification and biblical verses that support my notion, because I don't believe in just using solely philosophy or emotions to justify a certain doctrine. You got to go to the Bible for the ultimate justification for your doctrines. And for that, I still got in trouble, and that was eventually the last we mostly tried to talk to each other. I see that he's, of course, still on YouTube, and I do wish him well. I wish him luck. I wish the main thing is that we could talk together at some point, because I know with Google Plus shutting down, that was essentially the only means that there was really a communication effort with G-Man, and now there's really not much elsewhere I can try to reach out for a contact on that. And that's what I kind of want to do, is just go over some of the stuff and see how he's doing, see how he's been, and kind of go over an exchange and see if we can kind of help each other out to some degree. So those are just things I wanted to kind of reflect, is the notion of what happened between us. And I think in some way it has made both of us come out differently. And I believe that we needed to have the controversy in these discussions and these issues, but at the same time, I feel like it also has changed to a degree that it's not not good to some degree. Like it hinders and prevents us from certain deals we were able to try to get with each other on. So I'm just hoping that one day we can have that point of arranging for a meetup in online where we can talk via Discord or on social media of some sort. Because well, people like to give G-Man a hard time, and I understand that. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't as closely associated with him. We obviously had our differences of opinions and approaches, but yeah, G-Man is just. I'd say he gets treated a lot more harshly compared to some. I understand, of course, why some treat. So why some people would treat him like that. So that being said, I'm going to end the stream here, and I would like to thank y'all for bearing with me on that. But until then, this has been RC Apologist. Take care.